Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sports Deep Dive Podcast. I'm your host, Roger Harrison. I'm joined today by Brian Koparik. Brian, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing well. So today we're going to talk about the St. Louis Browns. Not the Cleveland Browns, not the St. Louis Cardinals, the St. Louis Browns.
Okay.
Now, the St. Louis Browns were a Major League Baseball team that originated in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Guess what their name was?
What was their name? The Wisconsin Browns?
No, the Milwaukee Brewers.
Really?
Now, the Brewers, this version of the Brewers, not to be confused with the current version of the Milwaukee Brewers, this version of the Brewers played in the Western League for the Western League. Now, for the 1900 season, the Western League was renamed what? The American League, that's correct. And in 1901, league president Ban Johnson declared it a major league. And so that's why Major League Baseball recognizes the American League as being founded in 1901 as opposed to 1900. Because Ban Johnson said, we're a major league, so just forget that. The team was originally owned by Milwaukee lawyers, Matthew and Henry Kalia, because it was based in Milwaukee.
Right.
Now, as a minor league team, the Brewers had usually fielded subpar teams until Connie Mack. You familiar with Connie Mack? Connie Mack became manager in 1894.
Okay.
So the Kalias, the owners, were among the poor owners in the league and did not have the wherewithal to take advantage of the large number of National League players bolting to the league. So of the 100 frontline players who switched leagues, only 3 signed with the Brewers. So that gives you an idea. National League was considered the major league. You had a lot of players leaving other leagues to go to the National League. And out of the 100 players or so who switched leagues, only 3 signed with the Milwaukee club. So Mack transferred to the Philadelphia Athletics, now known as the Athletics.
The Athletics.
At Johnson's behest as manager and part owner. And one of the 3 players who jumped to the Brewers, Hugh Duffy, became player manager.
Okay.
So this starts Connie Mack's tenure in with the Philadelphia Athletics and that franchise, and he put that franchise on the map. And I guess, I don't know Ban Johnson. I wasn't around in 1900. Late 1800s. And so I guess he felt like, you know what, the owners of the Brewers, they have no money. I want you to go to a franchise where you can thrive, Connie Mack. And, that's what happened. This goes about what I just said. Johnson knew the Brewers could not work in Milwaukee. And he originally intended to move them to St. Louis, which was a larger market. At the time, St. Louis was the 4th largest city in the nation, while Milwaukee was 15th. But one of the owners, Matthew Kalia, persuaded Johnson to give the Brewers what amounted to a 1-year trial.
Okay.
Saying that he would agree to move to St. Louis if the team didn't make a good account of itself that year. So this is what you're looking at, right? 1900, this will be renamed the American League, right?
Right.
We haven't gotten to 1901 yet, where Major League Baseball recognizes the American League founding. And he's saying, give me a shot. I'll try to do better, Ban Johnson.
There you go.
Well, due to the lack of talent, the Brewers didn't do so well. They never recovered from an 0-5 start and crumbled to last place for good on June 30th.
Oh,
They finished 48-89,
that's pretty bad.
the worst record in baseball.
Ever?
35 and a half games behind the pennant-winning Chicago White Sox. You've heard of them, right?
I have heard of them.
Chicago White
I
Sox.
have heard of them.
It didn't help matters that Matthew Clearland spent most of the season battling tuberculosis.
Oh.
And then he died on it on July 27th. So Henry, his brother Henry, was forced to become the operating head of the team. So what do you think happened?
Well, at that point, did they sell?
Well, so due to that awful season in 1900, and due to the agreement with Van Johnson, Henry Calais requested and received permission to move at a league meeting in Chicago.
To move it.
To move the franchise, right?
Okay, so he moved it.
Well, yeah. Remember, Ban wanted to move it, but he was the president of the American League and basically the commissioner, because But I mean, he had to have approval of the owners. So soon after the moving, the team changed its name to the Browns, a reference to the original name of the St. Louis Cardinals, who were known from 1880 until 1900 as the Brown Stockings.
Oh, okay.
So what's funny is that, all right, so we've got this baseball team in St. Louis,
Right,
known as the Brown Stockings.
right.
In 1900, when the Brewers were, in the American League, and then they say, you know what, it's 1901 now, let's become the Cardinals, or let's go back to the Cardinals. And then, I guess to capitalize on the popularity,
We'll be the Browns.
yeah, we'll be the Browns. So it's just weird how that
Worked out.
worked out.
Yeah. Huh.
All right, so then what? All right, so Henry, this was his brother's passion, and he co-owned it with his brother. But I mean,
His brother was running the team, doing the stuff.
yeah,
whatever.
and so then that means that Van Johnson went about finding local ownership for the team. Now he found it in a group headed by an old friend of Van Johnson from his days as a sports writer. Kansas City, he was a Kansas City carriage maker, Robert Hedges,
Okay.
who moved to St. Louis just as the purchase was closed of the Browns, the Brewers becoming the Browns. So here we are. The Milwaukee Brewers of 1894 are now the St. Louis Browns of 1901, playing in that American League. And you're probably going, well, that's great, but I still don't know who this team is. Well, hang on, Brian. Good
Okay,
Lord.
I'll calm down.
Jeez, leave your shirt on. I mean, seriously, leave your shirt on. In their first season in St. Louis, the Browns finished second under manager Jimmy McClear. They're 5 games behind Philadelphia, and they are the Philadelphia Athletics, and they are managed by Connie Mack. Remember Connie Mack?
I remember.
This was mainly because Hedges and McClear persuaded 6 Cardinals to jump to the Browns. Like, look, you're already here in St. Louis anyway.
Might as well come play for us.
Just play for us. I mean, seriously. I mean, we'll win some games here. You'll get some playing time.
Yeah.
Playing with those Cardinals. They looked to become even more powerful in 1903 when Hedges signed New York Giants ace Christy Mathewson. You remember him?
No, it's not a name I'm familiar with. I'm sorry, Rogers. I know that just let you down. Can we still be friends, man?
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, so the deal was going to be he would be making 4 times what he was earning in New York
Okay.
for the Giants. 4 times.
That's That's a lot.
And
So he was going to be making
that's Christy Mathewson.
from $100 to $400.
I don't know what that made back then. That's not part of the podcast.
I got you.
Well,
I mean, we're talking about the 1900s, so.
Well, but see, 1903. But see, here's the thing: is you had the American League, you had the National League,
Right.
and Van Johnson's like, we're a major league. National League had already been established as a major league. National League was founded in 1876. So they butted heads. There was a lot of rating of the two leagues for players and
competition,
players, front office people, that type of stuff. So as part of the settlement that ended the war with the National League, Hedges and Matheson had to tear up the contract.
Oh, no.
They tear up the contract. Hedges would say this years later that he was like he'd given up a pennant by relinquishing Matheson back to the Giants. But he felt it was more important to bring peace.
Okay.
Yeah. The Browns had only 4 winning seasons from 1902 to 1922, so that little Christy Mathewson really set them back.
Yeah.
Now, they were very popular at the gate during their first 2 decades in St. Louis, though. They trounced the Cardinals in attendance. In 1908, for instance, they attracted 4 times as many fans as the Cardinals. And that's hard to believe.
It is hard.
Because people in St. Louis love the Cardinals.
Yeah.
They do. So after a few seasons, Hedges was like, I got to do something. So he hired former Browns catcher Branch Rickey. You heard of him?
Yes.
Okay, so he hired him as the business manager, basically a general manager.
Right.
He hired him midway through the 1913 season and made him manager as well in September.
Okay.
So we're talking about June, you're going to be my general manager, and then September, you're going to be my manager as well. Kind of a double title, double duties.
Double duties.
Now we're going to fast forward to the present. There have been many types in baseball, basketball, and football of men who have held both the title of coach or manager and general manager. And my knowledge, and maybe some of the fans can leave some in the comments, to my knowledge, it has never worked out.
Not money.
Because
jobs.
one has either suffered because of the other.
Right.
If they've been all in getting players, then the coaching has suffered. If they're all about the coaching, then their roster building has suffered. So now, Ricky was the Medicore player at best, but he had a keen eye for spotting talent, right? His greatest find was George Sisler, who had played for Ricky at where? Michigan. Yeah, right, your school. Nice. They fell back to 6th place in 1914, but won 79 games in 1950, their first winning record in 8 years. Yeah. And you thought the lean years of the Detroit Tigers were bad.
Yeah.
Now we got another league war going on with the Federal League.
The Federal League.
Yeah, the Federal League. The Federal League tried to start up as the 3rd major league, and it really didn't. So as part of the settlement that ended that war with the Federal League, Hedges sold the Browns to a refrigerator magnate, Philip de Castibal, who had owned the Federal League's St. Louis Terriers. So at this point, you've got 3 baseball teams in St. Louis.
Oh my gosh.
All claiming to be, we're a major league team.
Right.
Whatever. So, so the new owner, said, you know what, Branch Rickey, you're better as a GM, not a coach. So I'm going to hire this guy named Fielder Jones as my manager. What a great baseball name, Fielder Jones.
Fielder Jones.
So under Ball's early tenure, the club had first sustained period of success on the field. They were a contender for most of the early 20s. Yay! However, like most owners, Ball was too hands-on.
Had to be a part of it all the time.
So shortly after buying the team, he allowed Branch Rickey to accept the presidency of the Cardinals. Yeah. Right. And
Traitor.
when Dan Johnson got wind of this, he told Ball, under no certain terms, Rickey was not allowed to go to the National League. However, since Rickey had signed a contract, Ball was only able to keep Rickey on his payroll for another 24 hours. I mean, basically, he had signed the contract, and so he had to go. And sorry, man, Johnson.
Yeah.
Now, I'll get to Branch Rickey in a minute, but let's move on. So Rickey was replaced by Bob Quinn. So 4 years later, Ball allowed the Cardinals to move out of Robinson Field, which was tore down, and share Sportsman Park with the Browns. And
So
now
they got two major league teams in one park.
right, and what's surprising to some people and some Cardinal fans may think, well, Sportsman Park was our place. No, it wasn't. It was originally the Browns' place, and then your place of Robinson Field was tearing down, and so you moved in. I just think that's interesting because I always thought that,
It was the Cardinals.
yeah, the Sportsman Park was Carl. All right. So let's get back to Branch Rickey. So do you know what he did when he was at St. Louis? We all know what he did when he was with the Dodgers, with the Brooklyn Dodgers. But do you know what he did when he was in St. Louis?
No.
All right, so basically, when Robinson Field was sold, they decided to use that money to build a minor league minor league farm system.
Okay.
So Branch Rickey, I don't know if you know this or not, but Branch Rickey is the architect of the minor leagues as we know it today, the farm system that
Okay.
everyone uses.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
So, and he is the credit, and that's what kind of got St. Louis going.
Was starting to develop.
Well, I mean,
those
because
players.
you had all these teams playing in these cities all over the place.
Right.
And instead of competing with them, Branch Rickey basically said, look, why don't you be a feeder system for the St. Louis Cardinals? And, your fans will love it because, it'll be local guy, playing for the local team in Columbia, Missouri. I'm just making up a
Right.
place,
Right.
can come to the Cardinals and that'll be good. So, so that kind of got St. Louis going because like I said before, the Browns were the most popular team in St. Louis as far as baseball, and the Cardinals were the second-rate team. And the Browns had those few lean years, but it looked like they were getting back.
Yeah.
Right. So, so meanwhile, let's go to the Browns. So Ball, confidently predicted there would be a World Series in Sportsman Park by 1926. He goes, my Browns are so darn good. There's going to be a World Series in Sportsman Park by 1926. So because of that, he increased the capacity of his ballpark from 18,000 to 30,000.
Whoa.
All right? And you know what happened? There was a World Series in Sportsman Park in 1926, but it was the Cardinals. The Cardinals
That bit him in the butt a little.
the Cardinals upset the Yankees in that World Series.
Nice.
St. Louis Cardinals, world champions, 1926. Whoopsie. That year, the Browns slumped to 7th place in the American League.
Okay.
Whoopsie. More importantly, though, the Cardinals outdrew the Browns by more than 400,000.
Wow. Throughout the year.
400,000, yes.
Now, is Ball getting... I mean, he's letting them play there, but he's got to be getting something for it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so I don't have those numbers about what the Cardinals were paying rent to the Browns, but I'm sure they were paying them something, some type of rent or something. So St. Louis had been considered a Browns town until then.
It's becoming a Cardinals town.
And as late as 1925, so, the Browns outdrew the Cardinals by more than 50,000. But after that 1926 World Series victory, the Cardinals dominated St. Louis baseball. While still technically tenants of the Browns, see? And that's why, a lot of Cardinal fans thought that Sportsman Park was theirs and not the Browns. So the Browns rapidly fell into the cellar. They had only 2 winning records from 1920 to 1943. They were 43 and 111 in 1939. That gives you an idea.
But they're still rolling. All this time, they've got an American League and a National League Major League teams in St. Louis, and they're playing in the same ballpark for like 20 years.
Yeah, and here's the thing about, if I'm a baseball fan living in St. Louis at that time, I'm excited because
there's a game every day.
There's a game every day, and I get to see the Dodgers.
Yeah.
I get to see the Braves. I get to see the Giants. I get to see the Yankees. I get to see the Red Sox. I get to see...
You don't have to go anywhere.
Right.
It's just like, as much as you want, it's there.
Yeah, because before interleague play, if you lived in like a National League city, you only would see the Dodgers and Giants and Braves and Reds and all that. And if you lived in an American city, American League, you'd only get to see the Yankees, the Red Sox.
Right.
But places like Chicago, which had both, and still have both, you can see. Interleague play has kind of diluted that because, I want to see the Tigers, but when they're in town at the White Sox, I can't make it, so I'll just go see them when they play the Cubs.
Right.
Whatever. So I got to get back. That record, it blew my mind. Wow. 43 and 111 in 1939. Can you believe that? So as a measure of how rapidly St. Louis shifted to the Cardinals, the Browns set a franchise record for attendance in 1922, attracting over 712,000 people. That figure would never be approached again for the rest of the franchise tenure in St. Louis. So for 1 year, they drew 712,000 people.
Right.
And then that would remain the franchise record until 1954. And you're probably asking, well, what happened in 1954? Go ahead.
What happened in 1954?
You'll have to wait.
Oh.
Ball had previously spent so much money on the Browns, but gradually cut that spending to the bare minimum, like the movie Major League.
Yeah.
Now, Ball died in 1933, and his estate ran the team for 3 years with Ball's former right-hand man, Louis von Weiss, as team president. But Ball estate mostly left the baseball side to the player manager and former Cardinals great Rogers Hornsby.
Okay.
No relation. Whom Ball had hired in one of his last acts before his death. The Ball estate needed capital. The Ball estate withheld capital that they could have used to get better players. Attendance sagged to the point that the other American League teams could not meet their travel expenses.
Wow.
Because you know that
Right.
they get half the gate or
Right.
whatever it is, right? And so like, well, we need.
Right. We're having to pay out of our own pocket to come
Right.
to these games.
So in 1936, they brokered a sale to investment banker Donald Lee Barnes. Now, Cardinals treasurer Bill DeWitt was Barnes' son-in-law. He bought a minority stake in the Browns and became the team's general manager.
Okay.
Now, the DeWitt name is famous in St. Louis, but we can talk about that at another podcast.
All right.
So to help finance the purchase, Barnes sold 20,000 shares of stock to the public at $5 a share, which was unusual for a sports franchise to do. Now you've got the Boston Celtics. You can buy stock in them. They're limited partnership. We all know about the Green Bay Packers.
Right.
But back then, not very good.
Not the norm.
Soon afterwards, he fired Roger Hornsby, the Cardinal great, after learning he was placing bets on horse races during games. Hey, should we get that picture up?
Yeah, hold on.
I got to see who wins the third race.
Hey, stealing your heart's running right now.
Right. 1941, Barnes was convinced he could never make money in St. Louis. Investors in Los Angeles approached him about buying a stake in the team. He asked American League owners for permission to move there for the 1942 season.
Okay.
Los Angeles was already the fifth largest city in the United States and was larger than any major league city except New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Detroit. Can you believe that? Detroit was bigger than LA.
Right. That's crazy.
The Browns got tentative approval from the league, and they went as far as to draw up a schedule. They had the transcontinental train trips all set up. The Browns suggested that teams could travel by plane, which was new at the time. Under the deal, the Browns would buy the Chicago Cubs' top affiliate, the Los Angeles Angels.
Okay.
Who played where? The Angels played in Wrigley Field in Los Angeles.
Really?
There was a Wrigley Field in Los Angeles.
Nice. I didn't know that.
See,
That's
the
cool.
connection. So in those days, whoever owned a minor league team owned the major league rights to that city.
Oh, that's why they had to buy the minor league team.
The deal was slated to receive final approval at a league meeting on December 8th. December 8th. Right?
Right.
December 8th, 1941. Do you know what happened the day before, on December 7th, 1941? All right. The deal was disrupted by the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, I was trying to think, I was sitting there thinking, was it D-Day or was it Pearl Harbor? And there you go, my military history's not amazing, but I knew it was some sort of battle.
Sources differ on how the deal fell apart. According to the Los Angeles Daily News and the Los Angeles Times, the American League owners unanimously rejected the proposal after league officials expressed concerns that travel restrictions would be too stringent for a prospective Los Angeles-based team to be viable. So, we had this attack on Pearl Harbor,
right,
and that
blew everything.
The president said, "All right, we're gonna limit the travel restrictions. We're gonna go to war. We're gonna limit, all these resources so we can prepare for war." And so,
Can't do it.
that means train travel as well as air travel. However, according to the Society for American Baseball Research, Barnes himself pulled the proposal off the table when he realized that a potential Japanese attack on the West Coast, a concern at the time immediately after Pearl Harbor, would make large-scale events on the West Coast too great of a risk. Okay.
So either theory kind of holds water.
Yeah, because there was talk, we attacked Pearl Harbor, we're going to attack the West Coast, we're going to get those Americans.
Yeah.
But can you imagine, first of all, the first baseball team in Los Angeles would not have been the Dodgers, it would have been the Angels. The Angels came to the American League expansion team, I believe, in the 60s, 62, I believe. And it's just how much history would have been rewritten.
Right.
That just blows my mind. So you're probably going, well, what does this mean for the Browns? There's no St. Louis Browns today, so whatever happened to them? So during World War II, in 1944, the Browns won their only American League pennant in St. Louis.
Okay.
And that was because the draft, because of the draft, of the war, Barnes and the Browns pursued a strategy of pursuing players who couldn't serve in the military. So while some of these rosters were kind of weakened, I guess, because their players were being drafted to go fight in the war, they said, well, we just get people that weren't drafted in the military. As a result, many of the Browns' best players were classified as 4F, which is unfit for military service. So years of having to live a hand-to-mouth existence actually served them well during the war years. They were better prepared to adjust to the effects of the draft, while wealthier teams like the Cardinals,
who had just bought
were caught unaware when their best players were drafted. Browns spent the season in a vigorous three-way race with your favorite team, the Tigers, and the Yankees for the pennant on the final day of the season. For a sellout crowd of 35,518, their first sellout since 1924. They defeated the Yankees 5-2. Minutes earlier, the
Yankees
Tigers
don't have any luck in St. Louis, man.
No, they don't. Minutes earlier, the Tigers lost 4-1 to the Washington Senators, giving the Browns the pennant by a single game. They thus become the last of the 16 teams that made up the major leagues from 1903 to 1960 to play in a World Series. By comparison, the other 7 American League teams had won at least 3 pennants. So, in the 1944 World Series, the Browns were underdogs against who? The St. Louis Cardinals, against their own tenants. So this was the St. Louis World Series.
It's a home game for everybody.
Yes. I wonder if they give out travel money. Meal money. It would be the last World Series played entirely in one stadium until the 2020 World Series played in Arlington, Texas, and that was because of COVID, as you know.
Yeah.
The Browns lost in 6 games. They won 2 of the first 3 games, and the final 3 games were very close. But despite losing the series, Barnes took heart in outdrawing the Cardinals by almost 40,000 fans.
How do you know? They're all the fans from St. Louis.
No, I mean,
shirts?
no, he's talking about
over
during
the season.
during the season.
I got you.
Because probably because the Cardinal fans were like, who are these guys?
Right.
Yeah, the guy that I like is off fighting the Germans.
Right.
It would be the only time after 1925 that the Browns would outdraw the Cardinals. Whew. Now, the 1945 Browns, came about. However, in August, Browns abruptly sold his stake in the team to minority owner and refrigeration magnate Richard Muckerman, who retained DeWitt as the general manager. While the Browns had the best record in the league from the time Muckerman closed on the purchase, the hole from earlier in the season was much to overcome. Finished in 3rd place with 81-70 record. Despite fielding less than top-level talent, they were only 6 games behind the Detroit Tigers for first place. After Muckerman bought the team, he signed manager Luke Sewell to a 2-year contract. Sewell significantly cut back playing time of his players. And, sending some to the minor leagues. Because,
right.
The war was starting to come to an end, and the boys were coming back, so to speak. The Browns basically had crested. They would never have another winning season in St. Louis. 44 and 45 were 2 of the only 6 winning seasons they enjoyed in the 31 years after nearly winning the pennant in 1922. They were also 2 of only 7 seasons finishing 4th or better.
It's amazing that a team that had done that bad made it that long.
Yeah. Yeah. The Muckerman had budgeted $300,000 to renovate Sportsman Park in 46. But the bill was $700,000.
Oh.
Because the original budget was not enough to bring the park up to code. He also built a new stadium for their top farm team, the San Antonio Missions of the Texas League.
Okay.
San Antonio still is around today. They are a double A team. After slow starts in 1947, he would sign Negro League stars. That only lasted a month when it became clear they neither improved attendance or on the team's on-field record. So, after 3 years after winning the pennant, the Browns posted the worst record in the majors at 59 and 95.
Still not as bad as some of their earlier records,
mm-hmm.
though.
And then Muckerman just started to sell players. He sold a couple of players to the Red Sox. Years later, Bill DeWitt revealed that between the renovations cost and for cost of the building the new Mission Stadium in San Antonio, and a marked drop in attendance, the Browns were basically on the brink of bankruptcy.
Collapse.
Yeah,
right.
Bankruptcy. So, at the time, we had buyers begin circling the Browns. Chicago businessman Emory Perry considered buying the Browns, moving them to Los Angeles. But that was nixed when Perry learned that any major league team moving to California would have to compensate every team in the PCLL for invading their territory, the Pacific Coast League.
Okay.
After the season, Bob Rodenberg, owner of the National Football League's Baltimore Colts, considered buying the Browns and moving them to Baltimore. However, this hinged on the Cardinals buying Sportsman Park, and Rodenberg withdrew his offers when the Cardinals expressed little interest.
They're like, why would we buy it?
Yeah. So, 1948, another bad season. Browns struggled to attract crowds over 3,000. Muckelman sold the team to DeWitt and his brother Charlie, which at the time was the team's traveling secretary, because they basically were the only buyers that said, "Yeah, we'll keep them in St. Louis." However, they financed the purchase with notes totaling $1 million that were due in 1954, and the team's attendance of the next 2 years was nowhere near enough to service the debt. Under the circumstances, DeWitt was unable to reverse the slide and was forced to sell it to any good prospects to the Red Sox or Tigers in order to pay the bills.
Oh my gosh.
Can you believe that? The Tigers. The Tigers were the American League pinnacle, or the diamond, or I guess whatever you want to call them. 1951, Bill Veeck. Remember him? Yes. Bill Veeck, the colorful former owner of the Cleveland Indians, purchased the Browns from DeWitt. DeWitt stayed on as the team vice president. In St. Louis, he extended the type of promotions and wild antics that had made him famous and loved by many and loathed by others. His most famous stunt in St. Louis was held on August 19, 1951, when he ordered manager Zach Taylor to send in Eddie Gabel, a 3'7", 65-pound dwarf, to bat as a pinch hitter. Do you remember this?
No, but that sounds funny.
When Goodell stepped to the plate, he was wearing a Browns child's uniform with the number 1/8.
Oh gosh!
Knowing that Goodell had no strike zone to speak of because of his height, right. Veeck ordered Goodell to keep his bat on his shoulder, and Goodell walked on 4 straight pitches, just a bit outside. Oh my gosh. And so this stunt made American League President Will Harge very mad, and he voided Goodell's contract the next day. Goodell was by far the shortest person to ever appear in a major league game. 3'7", 65 pounds. All right, so here we go. There's another publicity stunt in which Veeck also did. The Browns handed out place cards reading take, swing, bunt, and so on, all right, to fans, and allowed them to make managerial decisions for a day.
That's a nightmare.
Remember, all right, so manager Taylor surveyed the fans' advice and relayed the signs accordingly. The Browns won the game against the Philadelphia Athletics, whose owner, Connie Mack, took part in the grandstand managers voting.
So he's up there voting too?
Yeah. All right, so after the 51 season, Veeck made Ned Garver the highest paid members of the Browns. Garver went on to win 20 games, and the team lost 100 games. He was the second pitcher in history to accomplish the feat. Veeck also brought Cecil Page back to Major League Baseball to pitch for the Browns. Veeck had previously signed the former Negro League great at age 42 to a contract in Cleveland at 48. Page was 45 when he returned to the mounds in a brown uniform. Veeck was criticized among baseball owners, but Page finished the season with a respectable 3-4 record and a 4.79 ERA. Veeck believed that St. Louis could no longer support 2 franchises and planned to drive the Cardinals out of town.
Oh, Scandalous.
He signed many of the Cardinals' most popular ex-players, and as a result, attracted many Cards fans to see the Browns. Vecht inked former Cardinals great Dizzy Dean to a broadcasting contract and tapped Roger Hornsby for a second stint as a manager of the Browns. He also reacquired former Browns fan favorite Vern Stevens and tied former Cardinals pitcher Harry Brecken. Both who were in the St. Louis World Series in '44.
Okay.
Vecht stripped Sportsman Park of all Cardinals material and dressed exclusively in Browns memorabilia, even moving his family to an apartment under the stands.
Okay.
So I guess when the Cardinals played there, they had all this Brown stuff up there. In Vecht's 3 years as owner, they never finished any closer than 31 games out of first. Twice lost 100 games. Vecht's showmanship and colorful promotions made Brown games more fun than, the Cardinals were willing to offer. I mean, I guess that's a bright part.
Right.
Vecht's all assault on the Cardinals came during a downturn in the Cardinals' fortunes after Branch Rickey left them for the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1942. And we know what happened with Branch Rickey after that. It appeared that Vecht had won the war with the Cardinals when their owner was charged with massive tax evasion late in 1952.
Ooh.
Yep.
More scandals.
He pleaded no contest and put the Cardinals up for sale rather than face certain lifetime banishment from baseball. So for a time, it looked almost certain that the Cardinals were leaving town. So Vecht's plan almost looked like it was working.
I wonder if he's the one that turned the guy in.
The most promising offer for the Cardinals came from a group based in Houston, Texas, where the Cardinals operated a AAA farm team. Under the rules of the time, as we've talked about before, the Cardinals also owned the major league rights to Houston. However, just when it looked like the Cardinals were about to move to Texas, their owner accepted a somewhat lower bid from St. Louis-based Anheuser-Busch.
So that's how they got control.
Now, he had intended all along to sell to any credible buyer who would keep the Cardinals in St. Louis, and was relieved when brewery president Gussie Busch jumped into the bidding with that in mind. Whoopsie! Vecht quickly realized that he was finished in St. Louis.
It's over.
He knew that with Anheuser-Busch's corporate wealth behind them, the Cardinals now had more resources than he could ever hope to match. Unlike most of his fellow team owners, he had no income apart from the Browns. Reluctantly, Vecht concluded he had no other option but to cede St. Louis to the Cardinals and move the Browns elsewhere. As a first step, he sold Sportsman Park to the Cardinals for $800,000. He would likely have to sell in any event. So the 44-year-old park had fallen in disrepair, and even with the rent from the Cardinals, Vecht wasn't bringing in nearly enough money to bring the park up to code. So he said, "You know what, Cardinals, you can have it for $800,000."
Not bad.
Now, Vecht first attempted to move the Browns back to Milwaukee.
Okay.
Where he had owned the AAA Brewers of the American Association in the 40s. However, the Brewers were now the top affiliate of the National League's Boston Braves, which would come into play when they were later moved to Milwaukee. But anyway, and therefore had first claim on the major league rights to Milwaukee. Vecht offered to pay the Braves owner $700,000
because he just got $800,000
as compensation. The owner stalled on the deal before abruptly moving the Braves there himself in March of 1953, 3 weeks before opening day. So yeah, they sure okay. Oh look, we've moved. Oh, all right. So this is where we're getting to where the Browns would eventually end up, all right? Meg got in touch with Baltimore Mayor Tommy D'Alessandro and attorney Clarence Miles. And we're leading an effort to bring Major League Baseball back to Baltimore, a city which had lost the previous team in 1903 after the second incarnation of the Orioles were folded and replaced by the New York Highlanders, which would later become the Yankees. So you hear that, Oriole fans? You had the Baltimore Orioles there in the early 20th century, but they moved to New York, became the New York Highlanders, which are today's New York Yankees. So it's because of you, Baltimore. The other owners were still upset about the publicity stunts he pulled at the Browns' home games. And it also opposed proposals Vec had made to pool revenues from broadcasting. Well, look at that. We're pooling revenues from broadcasting now, the national contracts and stuff. The revenue sharing idea was particularly funny to the Yankees because their broadcast income dwarfed most other franchises and still does, their local broadcast income. Although there was no official word that the 1953 season would be the Browns' last in St. Louis, unofficial indications leaked out to erode what support the Browns still had. Attendance fell to 3,860 per game, last in Major League Baseball. Under the circumstances, the Browns made a wretched showing, finishing 54-100, 46 games out of first. Not only was Vec forced to sell the top players to keep the team afloat, but late in the season, the Browns were running so low on baseballs, they were forced to ration them during batting practice.
Oh my gosh.
What would be the Browns' last game in St. Louis, a 2-1 loss to the Chicago White Sox, went into extra innings. Yay! We suck, and we're going to go into extra innings. The Browns had so few baseballs on hand that the umpires were forced to recycle the least damaged used ones. Reportedly, the last ball used was gashed from seam to seam.
Wow.
After the season, Vec cut a deal with Miles to move the Browns to Baltimore. Under the plan, Vec would remain as principal owner but would sell half of his 80% stake to a group of Baltimore investors. Despite assurances from Harridge that approval would be a formality, only 4 owners voted in favor, 2 short of passage. Reportedly, Yankees co-owner Del Webb was drumming up support to move the Browns to Los Angeles. Good Lord. I mean, this franchise in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I know.
You know why? Because Webb had some construction interest
in Los
Angeles. If the Browns were to move, he might get their stadium contract. Talk of an LA move may have been a bluff, though, because many owners believe that the travel and schedule considerations would make having only one franchise on the West Coast unsustainable.
Right.
Because remember in '58, when the Dodgers moved, they took the Giants with them, and so you had 2 franchises. Isn't that weird? You had 2 West Coast teams that played mostly East Coast teams, kind of like
but
the
they were fine.
Kind of like the ACC today in college sports. Look, here's the thing. Vec, Miles, and D'Alessandro realized what the other American League owners were doing. They wanted to push Vec out.
Yeah.
So over the next 48 hours, Miles lined up enough support from his group of investors to buy out Vec's entire stake for $2.5 million.
Okay.
So facing threats to cancel the franchise and having sold his only leverage, Vec had little choice but to take the deal, and the sale was approved. While Baltimore brewer Gerald Hofferberger became the largest shareholder, Miles was named president and chairman of the board. His first act was request permission to move the team to Baltimore, which was swiftly granted. With this, the Browns' 52-year history in St. Louis came to an end. The Browns were unique among the 50s baseball teams in that they moved eastward and not westward. And they changed their name to make a deliberate break with their history. So, for instance, Brooklyn, when they moved to LA, were still the Dodgers.
Right.
The New York Giants became the San Francisco Giants.
Right.
Boston, Milwaukee, Atlanta Braves, Philadelphia, Kansas City, Oakland, and now the Athletics. So they all kept their names and their history, but basically the Browns said no. December of 54, so the general manager traded 17 players to the New York Yankees, including most former Browns of note still on the Baltimore roster, dramatically changing the team. Again, Orioles fans, this is your fault. You built the Yankees, it seems. That is still the biggest trade in baseball history. The Orioles make almost no mention of their past as the Browns. However, in 2003, when they returned to St. Louis for the first time since they moved, they wore throwback Browns uniforms. So, in August of 1979, new owner Edward Bennett Williams bought back the shares Barnes had sold to the public in 1936, basically returning the franchise to private control and removing one of the last remaining links to the Browns era. The buyout price was not published, was not known. However, given the Orioles' prosperity over their then 25 years in Baltimore, the owners of those shares probably made a big return on their investment.
Yeah. So the Browns became the Orioles.
Yep. St. Louis Browns, an overall win-loss record of 3,414 to 4,465 in 96. So 96 ties, which is a 43% winning percentage during their 52 years in St. Louis. 43. Just some quick facts before we wrap up. The 1944 movie Going My Way, Bing Crosby wears a sweatshirt labeled St. Louis Browns and takes the boys to see them play. That was the year the Browns won the American League pennant. And remember, lost to the Cardinals in the World Series.
Right.
Skip a 10 and Kim Foley wrote a country rock song called the St. Louis Browns. The song appears on Batten's 1972 solo album Skip. The character Ernie Coach Pentuzzo on the television show Cheers mentions having played for the Browns.
Okay, I never knew that.
The 1971 novel Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. The author Hunter S. Thompson rents a white Cadillac Coupe de Ville and produces an identification card claiming to be Royal Duke, left fielder and batting champion of the St. Louis Browns.
Okay.
Jack's grandfather on the show Three's Company wanted Jack's dad to play for the St. Louis Browns.
Okay.
So even though they're not gone, there's still some
references
in popular culture. So that's it. So the question is, who are the St. Louis Browns? Well, they're today's Baltimore Orioles.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's podcast of the Sports Deep Dive Podcast. We appreciate you listening. This podcast is available on all podcast platforms, wherever you get it. You can just tell your friends, hey, just get it on your usual podcast platform.
That's right.
Before we sign out, Mr. Koperik, would you like to tell the folks how they can come in contact with you?
Sure. You can catch me on YouTube, Random Things with BK, and the same on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. So thank you, Rogers.
All right, I'm Rogers Harrison. I am at 318 North on Blue Sky. And until next time, I just want to say so long, everyone.